Hi everyone, we are now going to start our workshop. This is the Civil Society from Sanitation and Waterfall workshop of exchange and learning on WASH finance, and I want to thank all of you for being here. Most of you know me already, but for those that don't know me, I am Eloise. I'm the Sanitation and Water for All Civil Society Advisor. And today, as I said, we are holding a learning and exchange workshop on finance advocacy to prepare for Sanitation and Water for All's virtual finance ministers meeting. We are co-organizing this workshop with ANEW, and I wanted to really give a big thank you to Anjani Kapoor, my colleague, who's been helping in the preparation and leading on the preparation of this workshop. Before we start, I wanted to remind you that we have an interpretation service. So for those of you that are Francophone, you will need to go at the bottom of the screen and click on interpretation. And you will click on French. And for those of you that are Anglophones, when a Francophone is speaking, I suggest that you also click on the interpretation option and click on English so that you are able to hear the interpretation from the Francophone speakers. So I will now share my screen so you're able to see the PowerPoint. Great, thank you so much. I hope you can now see my screen. I will invite all of you to put your name and your organization in the chat so we know who is with us. So essentially the the agenda for today is that I will do a short introduction of the preparation of the finance ministers meeting and the CSO messages. Then we will have a presentation by Caterina Fonseca, who will be presenting on the finance manual for finance ministers that SWA has developed. And Caterina Fonseca is the SWA advisor on finance. And we will welcome questions from the floor and also for your own understanding, as this is a learning exchange. And then we will enter into another section, which will be to hear from all of you, and especially a few of you, on how you are preparing for the finance minister. But more than that, how are you engaging at country level on WASH advocacy for finance? And then we will wrap up the call with a conclusion, but also a moment where you can also tell us what are your main concerns on finance and what you think should be elements that we should bring to the attention of finance ministers during the finance ministers meeting. I will now just take you through a little bit on the finance ministers meeting preparation for Africa. I know that most of you have been able to get a lot of information from us on the finance ministers meeting, but just as a reminder, it will take place on the 4th of November. It's a virtual meeting, so everyone is welcome to join. And if you want to register to join, we've shared with you the links, but we can share them again, and Anjani will be sharing it in the discussion box. Essentially, the objective of the meeting is to really push and have a discussion with finance ministers on why is WASH an interesting investment and what is the investment case for them to want to invest in WASH. And this will be done by presenting essentially case studies where the finance minister will present how they have been able to leverage further funding for the sector or lead to further efficiencies in the funding that they have available. And there will be a presentation of 4 case studies from the finance minister of Senegal, Egypt, Rwanda, and Kenya. And it will be an opportunity to hear from the finance ministers and for finance ministers to have a discussion. There will be a space for other constituencies to also engage, and this will come as a second part of the finance ministers meeting, in which a CSO representative will be asking a question to finance ministers alongside the other representatives from other constituencies, that it will be the expression of the concerns of CSOs on finance, or of ideas of CSOs of how finance ministers can leverage and target their financing further for those that are left behind. So I would really, really encourage you to participate, to come and register to the meeting. I think it's going to be an important moment, given that, as you know, with COVID, there is a real need for further financing for the sector, but also that this financing keeps on being targeted for those that are left behind and WASH. And we encourage you the week before the finance ministers meeting to do a buzz on finance, to use your media, to use your preparation of the finance ministers meeting, to really share your messages, engage with your country focal points, so that CSOs can have a space at national level to really bring that voice forward on the needs for investments in WASH. I will not go too much more in detail, just to remind how CSOs can engage for the finance ministers meeting. So like I said, at the international level, we will have a CSO speaker, but it's really at country level that there is a real space for CSOs to engage. And I know that some of you, especially the country focal point, the CSO country focal points, you've already reached out to your line ministries and to finance ministers to ask them to attend the meetings. Some of you are already working with the country government focal points on doing a sector analysis of the needs for finance that they will share as a preparation of the finance ministers meeting. And a lot of you are working on joint CSO messaging on WASH and finance that you are either sharing already and preparing to share with the media, or directly with the sector ministers or the finance ministers. Just to let you know, we have shared with all of you global civil society messages that you can use and adapt to your own national contexts. And we really push that you do make it context specific. And essentially, they came from a joint voice from CSOs and with consultations in April. And they are putting an emphasis on 4 elements regarding WASH and finance. The first one is a request for more transparency and accessibility on information on the allocation of budgets, notably during the COVID-19 crisis and the recovery. The second main message from CSOs is a request for participation in budget planning for more and better budget allocation for those that are left behind. The third main message is to build stronger accountability mechanisms for those left behind. And the fourth key message, the global message of CSOs, is to call for investment in WASH as a priority for human development and also as a priority in the COVID response. I will then add maybe one last element, is that I've always said this to CSOs: really see the finance ministers meeting as an opportunity for leverage. It's a moment where you can be with an international community that is pushing for the question of finance and WASH to be more visible, more attractive, and put as a priority on the agendas. So use this opportunity to with all the work that you've done on advocacy for finance, use this opportunity as a leverage to share your results, to share your recommendations, and to ask for your finance ministers to really prioritize this question. So it's really a leverage opportunity to what you're already doing on WASH finance within your own advocacy strategies and activities. So I will now leave the floor to Caterina Fonseca, who I said is the SW advisor for finance, and she will take you through on what we've been able to prepare for the finance ministers meeting, which is the finance ministers manual, which provides very interesting case studies on WASH finance, but I'll let her present that section to you. Go ahead, Katerina, and I'll pass through the slides. So let me know when I pass the slides.
Hi, good afternoon, probably for most of you. I see some friends online. I was chatting with some of them. Nice to see you here. There's some background noise coming from some unmuted participants, so I would just like to ask you to please mute your mics. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me. I think some of you have already seen a couple of presentations on the handbook. Next, please. So I will be rather quick with the introduction to the handbook, assuming that most of you already heard or read parts of it. And then I'll go into the part which is not in the handbook mostly, which comes from my experience in the Watershed program, which are the 4 pathways for CSO engagement, and then some quick ideas how to use the handbook, which are very much aligned with what you already have in the SWA website and what Eloise has mentioned. And then there's some time for Q&A. Next. So SWA has launched a handbook for finance ministers last month. Next. I have co-written it with Bill Kingdom, Victoria Delman from the World Bank, and with Leslie Porris from water.org. But most importantly, this has been a very large effort for many people, for many organizations around the world. I also asked for many cases from civil society to really come and put together the best case studies that we have and successful on increasing finance to the sector. So we know what works. We want to share and inspire both with finance ministers, with line ministers, different ways to increase finance for the sector. Next. And why finance ministers? In some countries, ministers of finance are really just gatekeepers. They open the coffer of the state when mandated by heads of state. But most often, and in the many countries that you're from, ministers of finance and their treasury teams, actually, they put the budgets together with line ministers. There's the whole hearings and negotiations. And they do also make important decisions following national guidelines. That's why this conversation is so important. Next. So finance ministers can improve or can influence the water and sanitation sector and impact millions of people by working mostly on supporting policies in 4 key areas. So the first one is maximizing the value from the existing public funding. So public funding already is there, through incentivizing sector performance, improving subsidy targeting, it's a big one, promoting better sector planning and management, having costed multi-annual strategies, for instance. Number 2 is to mobilize additional funding. And this is also mostly public domestic funding by setting up adequate cost recoveries, reforming tariffs. Most of them are extremely inequitable, by introducing earmark taxes, which is very, very important for sanitation and to reach the poor populations, but also by establishing different mechanisms of cross-subsidization. This, I mean, unarguably, these are the least popular measures and the least popular cases, I think, that we have, but they're also the ones that rank the highest in mobilizing more finance. These 2 and the approaches within them are all about increasing efficiency in the sector as well. All of it, and the case studies describe it in some detail. Then the third approach, which is that the approaches to increase access to repayable domestic finance by creating mechanisms that reduce the perceived risk in the sector and by all kinds of different pooled funds at different government levels. And finally, they can also encourage innovation. In least explored approaches, we have included climate funds, which we found 1 successful case for the water sector, and also the first and only, so far, social impact bond for the sector. And it's all explained in simple language for everyone to understand. So on the left of the graph, you can see that the first 2 areas of intervention, the first 2 approaches mobilize more resources than the later 2 areas. And this is important because in all the discussions I've been having all the finance discussions and the engagement with partners, preparing also for the FMMs, is that the discussions move extremely fast to the last two approaches, when often many more funds can be mobilized with the first two approaches. So that's why this part is important. Next, please. And so for each of these intervention areas, we have more than 20 country short cases. They all have one thing in common. They require the cooperation with the colleagues from Treasury, from Ministry of Finance. And from this, I'm going to focus on the CSOs, which is Mozambique. And then I'm going to give you other examples which are not in the handbook. Next. So this is the part that was in the handbook. Now, what is not in the handbook? So in my experience, for influencing these approaches, there's 4 pathways for CSO engagements in the finance area, and they are very complementary to each other. So you should not be just working on one of them. So the first one is directly with Ministry of Finance, and this is the most rare, and it happens in more extreme cases of institutional failure mainly. The second one is engaging with Ministry of Water to reach Minister of Finance and or heads of states and other line ministries. This one we have some examples. The other one where we're having more and more examples, and a lot of the presentations are going to focus on this, is engaging with the district political and technical financial decisions in the sector. And the last one, which I think is one of the most important and is the one that we have been doing less, is engaging directly with citizens and other CSOs. I'll give some examples. Next, please. So for the first pathway, this includes a lot of coalition with NGOs and CSOs, but also a lot of coalitions with budget tracking organizations, which go well beyond the water sector. Next, the handbook shows the example for Mozambique. Next. Where the Mozambique Budget Forum has worked with Parliament directly to limit the budget cuts to the water sector in 2016, post the big financial crisis. So the Mozambique Budget Forum, which is a coalition of CSOs, supported the Planning and Budget Committee to actually scrutinize all the national budgets, present arguments for increased budget allocations to the sector. And it has also requested the government to set out the Mozambique national accounts in a clear, accurate, simple format, so to make them more accessible for citizens. And in 2017, the government agreed. So basically they managed to put a ceiling for the budget cuts. And then further than that, the government has made the nation's state general accounts readily available and has published them together with a simplified version called the citizen account. And I know some colleagues in North Kenya have actually done something similar for districts. So just basically simplifying the accounts and the budget projections of local government. You can do this on many different levels. Next, please. CSOs can also engage directly with Ministry of Water and other line ministries by understanding the budgets and expenditures, by setting accountability mechanisms, which are many times already part of existing regulations and not put into practice. This is very interesting. So you have entry points which are actually in your national legal frameworks. And they can participate actively in the sector reviews as well, but by bringing a stronger finance component. I've seen a lot of the sector reviews, and sometimes the finance is very poor. The whole part on how much is sector spending, absorption capacity, causes, reasons, to go a little bit deeper into the sector reviews on that. Next, please. I show a lot the example of Mali. I know we have going to have a presentation. I'm not going over it. I'm mindful of my time as well. Next, but just to mention that Mali basically went from over a little bit above 1% of the national budget to right now, last year, to 3.5% of the budgets. And what I want to say, that I don't usually say when I'm presenting this, is that many of you might think that this is a really long process. And the example of Mali, it did take 2-3 years for the start of the change to happen since the publication of the awareness for the budgets to the sector. But actually, more recently, this change is happening much faster. mainly at district level with good data, good evidence. By attending the right meetings, you actually can see changes within one budget cycle. Next, and I'm giving you an example of that. You can engage with the district political and technical financial decisions. Next. So some powerful examples here include open budgets, so open that they are painted in the wall. You can see this example from DORP in Bangladesh, where for the past 4 years, they have trained both local governments and local marginalized groups, so the two sides of the coin, on how to make budgets transparent and increase them for those being left behind. This photo here, this lady that you see, it's Kohinoor, and she is from one of the poorest communities in Bangladesh. They are the nomadic fishermen. She does not know how to read or write, but here she is in a local budget discussion meeting in Bola district, basically telling the issues of for her community. And she managed to be successful. Next. So after 4 years of collaboration, by the way, there's links in all of my slides have links, and you can go directly to the resource and the case studies, which explain this much better. And also there's a lot of videos about it. We have videos of Kohinoor speaking. You can see it also you can hear it from their own voice. So after 4 years of collaboration with DORP, with local governments, the budgets have increased every single fiscal year. There are other nearby districts adopting the same practices. There have been facilities built for the marginalized communities. You can see Kohinoor with her new standpipe there. And something that is really impressive are the sophisticated gender and marginalized budgeting processes, which I want to show you. Next, please. This is how it looks. I mean, this is how some of the budget tools look, with the allocations specifically divided for women and girls, elderly, persons with disability, excluded groups. It also includes both construction and maintenance costs. Again, you can find this in the links. And this is some of the most sophisticated budget processes I've seen all over the world. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And they are having these discussions and making specific budget tracking for leaving no one behind. That's why I wanted to show you this. Next. And finally, something I don't think we do enough, as I mentioned, in the water sector, which is engaging directly with citizens and other CSOs, being more accountable towards the citizens that we are supposed to represent, not only being accountable upwards towards governments. So how can you do this? I'm going to give you an example from Kenya. Next, please. So I don't have, the video is not ready. It's almost, it's an amazing story. So in Kenya, CESPAD in Kajiado County has engaged a popular radio, which is bus radio, at prime time for a whole week to discuss budget participation. Here you can see the main DJ and also one of the budget, so the main DJ is Victor Juma and Abigail Tawasa, who became a budget champion for her community after hearing the radio program. This was done just in September, so as a way to cope with COVID-19 restrictions. And the video story is almost ready, but also the budget manual is in the link. And I know that in Uganda and Fort Portal, EWASA is now using this methodology to also still influence the budget process for next year. Next, please. So where to start? I don't have time to go into all of, I put for some of the approaches in the handbook, some of the quick questions. And you can collect evidence, you can collaborate with others, you can bring these issues to the sector platforms. I have listed some questions here for colleagues of the Ministry of Finance and other line ministers, but I have also seen the list that was shared on the SWA website, and they're really good, and this is all compatible. So I just wanted to divide it among the 4 approaches. Next slide, last one. So to close, I would really like to say that a lot of the stories I'm just told you here are in this 11-minute video from the Watershed team. It's from 6 countries. It's very inspiring. It's very nice very beautiful to watch. And you have also a resource page where you can select per topic, finance or IWRM or data, and you can select the country as well, so you can find resources more adapted to your context. So next, and I think I'm finished. So thank you. If you need more information, please contact Mrs. Kapoor from SWA and Eloise. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Katerina. I think this is extremely useful. I think we now have 15 minutes to, I'm sure most of you have questions or comments. And so this is like I said, it's a learning exchange. So I will now ask those that want to speak if you can take the floor and or precise in the chat that you would like to speak so I can come back to you. But whoever wants to speak now can take the floor and I will give you the capacity to speak. And don't forget to unmute yourself. I'm expecting more people to come in to speak. Is there in the discussion box, is there anyone who would like to speak? Please, yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. My name is Stanley Chitukwi. I'm calling from Malawi. I work with OSED Malawi. OSED is an organization for Sustainable Socioeconomic Development Initiative in Malawi. I happen not to make any questions, but to make a comments. Thank you so much for the very good presentation, Katrina. I have seen that the presentation is really informed me, and also in Malawi, we have some issues that are hanging that we haven't done much. But looking at your presentation now, it is important for us as the CSOs to be part and to participate on the budget formulations when the government have formulated the budget on water and sanitation. Sometimes we are not being able to participate. Sometimes we participate not the way how we want to participate. But looking at your presentation now, it has now empowered me to participate effectively and to know the real reasons why I need to have a participation in the formulation of the budget, even in the policy processes in the government in Malawi. The second thing that also I want to comment is that the exchange of ideas, expertise, and skills that Katrina has presented on her presentation, it has also telling us an eye-opener that we need sometimes face-to-face exchanges, like what Mali has done so far. And if it would have to be that there's no COVID kind of a block, we would have to see that all of us need to be in Mali and to see how Mali has successfully in life. Also, we could also generate some kind of lessons from Kenya and the other countries that have done better in terms of the advocacy and policy processes in the budget kind of things in terms of water and sanitation. And also being able to appreciate the successful stories that we have seen aligned on her presentation of Katrina, could be more spicing and engagement of the media and also engagement of more stakeholders in understanding the scope of what is it that we want to talk to the government, what is it that we can influence the government. So I really appreciate with the presentation, and that's the way I wanted to make my comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That's actually something we're thinking in SWA for next year, is to offer more space for CSOs to learn amongst each other, peer-to-peer learning on those experiences on engaging with finance. So thank you for yeah, go ahead, Katrina.
So again, I can bring you the knowledge of my colleagues. I can just give you two quick examples, which I think are really nice. So some of our colleagues in Uganda were really thinking they were not being very successful with budget influencing. And then one of my colleagues decided, you know what, I'm just going to invite one of the technicians of the Ministry of Finance to come and present to the NGOs the budgeting process. Just get someone from finance to explain exactly where are the key moments of where participation is expected, when are the key decision makings, which meetings can you attend, which ones you can't, which ones your line ministers can attend. And it was really an eye-opener for the team. And they were doing it, they would not go in the right meetings at the right months at the right time. And the team in Bangladesh with DORP went further and actually wrote, they did an agenda, so like with the months. And at the start of each month, it's written, it's a budget agenda. It says which meeting you need to be preparing for in that month, knowing that in 3 months you have some of the hearings. So just some very quick tools on how to engage in some of those processes.
Thank you very much, Katerina. We have a question from Bubala and then Wilson. So we'll take both questions and then we'll come back to Katerina. Go ahead, Bubala, and then Wilson.
Thank you, Eloise. My name is Bubala from the Zambia NGO Watch Forum in Zambia. I'm very interested to learn about the tool that you showed. I mean, I think for me, it speaks very much to the conversation around how do we measure leaving no one behind. And I think for Zambia, we've had a challenge because I think we've only been able to disaggregate to the extent of urban versus rural. So I'm interested to know, how did they develop that tool? Is it used at district level or at national level? But like you said, it's very, very, very inspiring and very, I'm interested to learn how they did it and at what level they're using it, because maybe it's something that we could learn from. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, it's very challenging. So what I've seen, they use it at district level. That was the level they managed. The interesting thing is that they started in the Bola district, and now it's the 4th year that they have increases in the local budgets because of this whole process. And I don't think it's just water. This has influenced other sectors as well, that the other districts are copying the same methodology. So no one had to go and train CSOs and train government. No, they just, it becomes kind of, oh, this district can get more money. How are they doing this? And now they're also being much more participatory. I have to say, I was very surprised that they managed to go as far as not just gender disaggregation, but also the elderly, also the people with disabilities. And they did this really by starting, look, I see a lot of organizations saying, no, we work in the poorest areas, so we are addressing equity and leaving no one behind issues. But the truth is, in these situations, the low-hanging fruit, so the populations which are easy to target in that overall poor area get services first. So I think it's really important to start from identifying who exactly is being left behind and where they are. Is it a geographic situation? Is it a tribal racism situation? Is it the disability, so a physical impairness to access services? What is the reason of the exclusion? And then start tracking that. If you start just from rural or urban and wealth quintiles, you're going to miss a lot of the very specific population that needs to be targeted. One advice that I have, even for the national level, distinguishing between the funds that go for the rural and versus the funds that go for the urban sector, is to try to start looking at the inequalities in both the subsidies and the tariffs allocation. I think that's where we can go in terms of tracking and influencing that is related with finance. Most of the subsidies, I think it was a World Bank study. It's also referred in the handbook. It only reaches 6% of subsidies are actually reaching the population that they're meant to reach. Most of the tariffs for urban areas are extremely low. There's and these are for people that could actually pay for higher tariffs. And these higher tariffs will enable utilities to expand to those that don't have services whatsoever. So there's a lot of inequalities that we can look at national level. I'll leave it here.
Thank you, Katerina. We have 2 more questions coming in. Wilson from Waterwide, if you want to take the floor and ask or make your comment.
Okay, great. Good day. My name is Wilson Atumei. I work with Waterwide. At Waterwide, we track government spendings and international aid for water, sanitation, and hygiene to ensure transparency and accountability in project implementations. Over time for us at Waterwide, we found out that most challenges, because we work at rural communities, most implementations in rural communities are either slow, because people in these communities don't actually know that funds are allocated for WASH in those communities. Then we did a quick study to understand the dynamics between urban centers and rural centers. But still yet, we still see that people in urban centers, urban areas, usually make provisions for water for themselves. So every budget year, we see that billions are set aside for water projects, and it's just in some few areas. I stay in an urban center in Abuja, in the country's capital, and yet I think majority there is no government-linked water supply in this area totally. So everybody's drilling his own borehole to provide water for themselves. So for us working at rural communities, we usually go to those communities to find out if projects have started. If they don't, we do a preliminary visit. We call for a town hall meeting. We start our online and both online and offline advocacy, targeting key stakeholders. This manual that listening to this manual, I know we can really work with very key components on this, and I'm very excited to be here, and I believe WaterWide would really gain from this, being a member of SWA itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Wilson, and share the manual with us. This is a learning and exchange space, and I think picking up on what Stanley was saying, we're going to be trying to do more and more peer-to-peer learning between CSOs. Actually, talking about CSO capacity, there's just one comment from Ellen. Ellen, do you wanna say your comment? It's about kind of building the capacity of CSOs to engage in WASH. Do you want to add to what you've put in the chat?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's come up quite a bit, and in a lot of discussions with CSOs, and something that we found in the watershed program was that the ability and confidence to speak financial language with those that deal with that on a regular basis, I think is something that is a challenge. And so, you know, I think the handbook and the language is pretty, you know, it's understandable, but when you're trying to do number one and get in front of or in conversations about budget tracking and other things, to really understand that basic language, to be able to speak with those from across the table from you and to really influence. So Katerina, I mean, I had just put in the chat about the WASH Systems Academy course on finance, but is there anything else that you would recommend to increase that kind of financial literacy for civil society in a digestible way that provides that level of confidence to be able to speak with those that do that on a daily basis?
Yes, I mean, I think, again, from Watershed's experience, I think there's actually a very interesting way to do this faster and effectively. It is to, and I think we're going to have a presentation, I was very happy to see that here, is to form alliances with the organizations. Most countries already have organizations that track budgets at government level. They are usually quite recognized. They follow all the budgeting processes. But, and I started following some of them on Twitter a couple of years ago. And then I started wondering why the India one was not talking about water, the Kenya one was not, Uganda one was not. So then we brought to Watershed partners, and I know that USNet also is, and we're going to have a presentation, started basically training the budget tracking organizations how to look at the water sector, because the water sector was too complicated for them to understand. And we did that with India, with CBGA, the Center for Budget Accountability and Governance. And we will have also the example from Uganda. So that allows for the water sector to get very quickly into the finance language, and for the budget tracking organizations to get quicker into the challenges of the water sector. The specialized course in the WASH Systems Academy, it's predicted to be done end of this year, but the short version that you can do in a day, I'm putting the link in the chat. You have to go to washacademy.org. It's a free online resource. You go to the building block course and you select finance. So that's a 1 day on the basic concepts of finance that will make you feel comfortable talking about finance in the sector. Hope that
Great.
answered.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone. So we're gonna wrap up this first section, and a big thank you to Katerina. We will share with all of you the PowerPoint, and like I said, we're gonna try in the future to allow for more peer-to-peer learning. So if you already have elements to share with us of some of the budget tracking tools that you're using at the country at your country level, let us know, because we can then gather them and share them back with others as a way to share and exchange. We're now going to enter the second section, which is really to hear more from you, because you have a lot of expertise as well at country level in engaging on WASH finance, but further than that, in also preparing and engaging with the finance ministers for the finance ministers meeting. So I will now leave the floor to Serene from ANEW, who will facilitate this second section.
Thank you very much, Eloise, and thank you very much, Katarina, for the really excellent piece of work on the handbook. Welcome to all of you. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. And as Eloise mentioned, of course, this is really in terms of creating an opportunity for peer-to-peer learning. So some of these key learnings and messages will be compiled as a blog, as what Eloise mentioned, and there's a possibility that we would also be having a policy brief after the meeting. So this more information will come on that piece of work. So for today, we have short interventions from Bubala, that is going to give us some of the highlights of budget advocacy. Ata from New Sun that will talk to us about budget tracking and the work that they have been doing. Unia from UASNet in terms of engaging with parliamentarians, and Dabalaba from Mali, who will be talking to us about how civil society is mobilizing for the FMM meetings. So they will present specific recommendations, but also entry points, showing us some of the entry points for finance advocacy. I would kindly ask our presenters to please keep it within 3 minutes, and so that we have enough time to open the floor for discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bubala Imovie from the Zambia WASH Forum. Bubala, over to you.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bubala, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so for the Zambia NGO WASH Forum, this year we've really been hitting hard on budget advocacy, because we, as a network, we were feeling a little bit I don't want to say, but frustrated that some of the things hadn't changed, you know, and we've spent a whole year singing the song about why investment in WASH is important, and then COVID happened, and then it became even more evident. So just from the slide, you can see that for Zambia, even with the aspects of hand washing, we are sitting at 24%. So only 24% of Zambians have access to hand washing facilities. Our numbers in terms of water, around 72.3% have access to improved sources of water, and only 54.4% have access to improved sanitation. So we engaged in specifically on public resources, because Zambia has a huge debt burden. Our government embarked on some large infrastructure projects, and in the process, they have accrued a huge amount of debt, which is now sitting at something like 80% of GDP. And we felt that this called for greater accountability in terms of how resources go to the WASH sector. Also, the financing the sector, in terms of disbursements, we get very good disbursements. We are meeting the threshold in terms of equity, but in terms of disbursements, it has been historically below 40%. You can go to the next slide. So this was kind of the rationale as to why we felt that, you know, we needed to add a stronger voice. So in doing so, we made alliances with coalitions that are working in education, coalitions that are working on poverty, and made them our champions to speak in terms of why and of how water impacts education sector, how it impacts health. And so we began our strengthening our alliances in those aspects. We also, post-COVID, we wrote to the Ministry of Water and also to the Ministry of Finance to ask for mitigation measures to cushion the commercial utilities, because a number of them were facing revenue losses. As much as 50% of their revenue was down. Also, we engaged again with the Ministry of Finance in terms of making budget submissions for the 2021 budget. And we made some proposals of how we thought they could generate revenue that could be used to invest in WASH activities. We held on a weekly basis, we have media engagement on local radio just to raise the visibility of WASH. Additionally, we engage with parliamentarians who come from cholera hotspots. As you know, Zambia is a hotspot for cholera. And also we engage with members of parliament from the budget committee, and with the view to influence parliamentary debate and make them our champions, and as well as giving them evidence which could influence parliamentary debates. We also used social media platforms, as well as post the budget, we made a press statement, again, on our view regarding the budget. But most importantly, we made the Ministry of Water our ally in the sense that we invited them to one of our meetings to share what their challenges were, because sometimes they cannot speak on their behalf, and we were, quote unquote, the voice on behalf of our line ministry to speak in terms of what they wanted to see in terms of investment going forward, particularly for next year's budget. Next slide.
Bubala, I'll have to cut you short.
You have to cut me.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, 3 minutes is a lot to say for about 9 months worth of work, but we would be happy to share some of the pieces of work that we have been doing. And upcoming, we've been invited to make a presentation on the special report of the Auditor General on the state of the commercial utilities in Zambia, and we'll be able to share as the year progresses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bubala, for that. I'd like now to call Atta Benson from New Sun and also chair of ANEW to give us some of the highlights of the budget tracking and the capacity building efforts that were done by New Sun. Also some amazing work that was done there. Please do go ahead, Atta.
Thank you very much, Sarin. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Talking about budget tracking, in Nigeria, particularly in the government sector, if you talk about budget, everybody becomes jittery. It's as though something terrible is going to be done to them. Nobody wants to hear you talk about budget. Even the same thing applies to some development and partners. So because of this, one of our, after we had our budget tracking training and for some of our state members, and we shared some of our media publication links. One of a stakeholder in development, who is also working in the development sector, made this quote, which I'm going to read. Honestly, if New Sun can venture into public expenditure tracking in WASH sector, most governors will be left without option than to release budget allocation for WASH. Commissioners will be left without option than to think twice before diverting public WASH release allocation. Development partners will be willing to work with government established structure without fear of diversion. There are a lot of attendant benefits if CSOs are tracking public expenditure and publish it in national and international newspapers. This will also include local newspapers of concerned states. This is a quote from a development partner when he read one of our media links. Just as I said, we've been making efforts to see how we can work with the various partners in the country to improve budgetary provision and release. Sometimes it's not just making budgetary provision, but releasing the budget. Like some of the issues I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share with you now. Because of the difficulty in getting financial investment in the WASH sector and also getting partners at both national and state level to release, we have to devise different means. We've had engagement with the Ministry of National Planning. We had engagement with Ministry of Finance. We had to devise other means of how to engage with the Accountant General Office. We've had engagement with the National Assembly, the Parliament, both lower house and the upper house. We are going a step further to see how we can engage with the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation to ensure that we have these issues around the budget addressed. And unfortunately, a whole lot of resources is spent on WASH in the country. Recently, there's a publication that was made by the ministry. A survey was carried out, which shows that 33.5 trillion naira, which is about 11.6 billion, was spent in the WASH sector. And out of that, you'll be surprised to know that about over 90% of that money came from private individual, private households, while less than 10% came from government and development partners. So you now start to wonder what happens to the various releases meant for WASH since over how many years now. So this is really a cause for concern. And that was why NUSAN had to go a step further to see how we get our members trained in budget tracking, which they've carried out a survey, and the result is being finalized now. So the issue of budget tracking in Nigeria has been a major concern for NUSAN, and this we are finding a way, always trying to find a way around it. In 2018, when we were doing a policy brief, we wrote to the Minister of Water Resources to get us information on the budget of the Ministry of Water Resources, which is the coordinator of the WASH sector. The ministry approved this and was assigned to a department. The department assigned one of his officers in the finance sector to work with us and give us the necessary information. This officer disappeared. We never saw this officer until we had to get our information through other sources. So you could see that budget tracking in Nigeria has been a huge concern to us, and that's why we have to look for ways and means of working around it. And I'm happy that we are really getting results. We're really getting results. And I also like to point out that some states use the WASH budget for politics, for so many other things. I remember in the course of doing a policy brief, we came across a state that allocated 500 million naira for WASH. And that budget was reviewed. The 500 million naira was approved.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay.
My apologies.
And that money was approved. Then nobody could trace or know what the money was meant for. So you can see that issue of budget tracking is of huge concern to us. And we use Nigeria as a case study, and the same thing applies to other African countries, which also is of a major concern to us. And we have to do everything. So budget tracking will help bring transparency into the sector and ensure that the various the expenditure really goes down to the citizen, to where it is meant for. It will also have to improve quality of projects, both at schools and hospitals, because you go to some schools and a project will be allocated to contractors, and this contracts will be abandoned or left undone. So we really need this budget tracking to ensure that we improve service provision in the sector and we improve accountability and transparency in the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Atta, for that excellent presentation. I'm sure you can share it with the forum later on, and you can always reach out to ATA for more information. I'd like now to introduce Yunya Musansi, Executive Director of UWASNet and Treasurer of ANEW, who will talk to us about engaging parliamentarians in finance issues. Over to you, Yunya.
Thank you, Sarine. Good afternoon, everyone. As I've been introduced, I'm Yunya Musansi, the ED of UWASNet. My presentation is really going to focus on where we are now regards engaging Parliament in fostering the advocacy of prioritizing financing to the WASH sector. Our story is not different from many other countries that have presented. And for us, yes, for many years, just like it will be depicted in my next slide, but let's focus on this first slide. The WASH sector has been marginalized, but we thought with the onset of COVID-19 and the call for hand washing as one of the key strategies to combat it, mainly by our president, his name you see there, President, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta. You see him demonstrating how to wash hands. We thought that this is the right time to capitalize on the importance of hand washing to curb on COVID-19 and also other wash-related diseases. So where we are now, that's the table above the picture, is the rate of infections is really escalating, where we're at 50% 50 infections in March, and right now it's more than 10,000 people who are infected. Let's move on. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, currently there's been a hike in hand washing, and this is mainly because of the promotion which is done by different political leaders. So our key message as UWASNet was to focus on sensitizing the key policymakers that much as you're promoting hand washing, but we still have more than 20 million Ugandans who don't have access to safe water. And around 22% still practice open defecation, and 40% only practice hand washing. So the key hindrance to this, the message that we're portraying, was that the key hindrance is because of the inadequate budget allocation to our sector, where you see that first graph indicating an average of 3% of the national budget that is allocated to the water and sanitation sector. And where we are now, based on an assessment which was done for the sector investment plan, which is estimating the requirement of financing that's required to meet the SDGs, we need 9 times the current budget allocation to the sector. So this is a message that we've been trying to advocate to different stakeholders over the years. So this year, we capitalized on the COVID and relation to clean water by focusing. One of the key stakeholders that we focused on was our engagement with parliamentarians. Though we've been having ongoing engagements, but this year, we really made sure that we help them to understand the correlation between COVID-19 and the need for accessing clean water. So we came up with different policy briefs that had key messages that were well packaged for them, and we engaged them through different strategies like the breakfast meeting. We engaged them in our webinars that we had. They were all focusing on the same theme of financing, advocating for financing to the sector. The key highlight was the last engagement that we had in partnership with Uganda Parliamentary Forum, which is the committee that is fostering WASH within Parliament. It was an e-conference, and this forum is chaired by the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Kadaga, whom you see there in the top picture. And the key highlight from this meeting was her commitment and the commitment of all the parliamentarians who attended to make sure that they join us in advocating for more financing coming to the sector. And more so where we are now in Uganda, our political environment. We expect our presidential and members of parliament elections in February 2021. So currently we are working with the UPF forum in parliament to start advocating for the prioritization of WASH within the manifestos for the different parties, political parties, but also individual members of parliament. And right now we're developing messages on social media and also using television and radio stations to foster this message. Our key learning from all this, as we engage the members of parliament, we've realized that they're always willing and eager to get this information because it also helps them, they get mileage within their constituencies if they address the right things that affect the communities. So the statistics that we give them, which are well packaged, is quite key learning for everyone that it helps to bridge the gap. Then the other thing is,
sorry, we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay, no, I delivered the key messages.
Thank you very much, Yunia, for your presentation. I'd like now to invite Timothy Kpe to talk to us about his experiences in Liberia, but also how civil society organizations are engaging around FMM. Timothy, over to you.
All right, so thanks for the presentation. Again, I'm Timothy from Liberia, SWA Civil Society Focal Point. And you can go to the next.
Timothy, I'm not sure we can hear you clearly. I'm not sure if it's the case for everyone. Could you get closer to your mic, maybe?
Hello?
Yes, go on, Timothy.
Okay, so I was saying that in Liberia, we actually been engaging the national government, and when we started our engagement, we started with the WASH Commission, knowing the fact that there's a newly established institutions that came out of the SWA arrangement way back in 2011 and 2012. So between our engagement up to present, those taking offices were new government officials. So those who were aware of the SWA arrangement, that government were taking, the new government were taking over for the old one. So we needed to provide more information. So in February 2019, we started more awareness about SWA arrangement. We reviewed the past commitments and then developed the new ones. And there were key media engagement initiatives that were held. And we also, in the process of doing that, we have the issue of the COVID-19, and that was that gave us another opportunity to really increase our advocacy about demanding WASH budgeting, WASH prioritization. We also carry on lobby meetings, engaging those members of the WASH Commission and other government ministry agencies that has WASH, providing key information about the importance of WASH. Then the next step was to engage the parliamentarians. So the establishment of the commission started with our engagement with parliamentarians that brought about the commission. So in order for them to give us the needed political will, we had to engage at that level. So we have a caucus, a WASH caucus is established in Liberia. And then we use this opportunity to raise more awareness about SWA commitments and the upcoming finance minister meeting. And on the overall, we have been able to review and develop the new commitments for Liberia SWA commitments, and we submitted that. We are then able to increase awareness about the SWA commitments and the finance minister meeting, ensuring that government is prepared to take on the commitments, the presentation at the SWA meeting. So some of the challenges we actually face for now is the new administration, as I mentioned earlier, where we have new government taking over, and then also the outbreak of COVID-19. We presently in the election periods. By December, there will be the senatorial election. So most of the government agencies are actually engaged into campaign activities, but then we also turn the challenge to an opportunity to run a WASH election campaign. Next steps, we are at the end of completing the country brief, which is ongoing, and that is linked with the WASH election campaign. The preparation of our finance minister is ongoing, and then other opportunities that we can tap on is the level of strong political will demonstrated by the WASH caucus. We now have WASH identified in the national budget, so we are advocating for increased budget allocation. We have presently our WASH champion, which is the WASH caucus chair, was appointed as member of the ECWA Parliament. We started a regional approach where we want to ensure that WASH is highlighted at the Mana River Union and the ECWA's level. So having our caucus chair appointed as member at that level, it gave us a great opportunities to approach WASH on a regional perspective. We have some key messages here where civil society conducted a budget tracking on the WASH of COVID-19 financing. And as you can see right here, 96% of funding to WASH in this country is coming from international partners. Our government is not doing very well to support WASH.
I will have to cut you short.
So just to summarize, you can go to the next. So just to summarize, we are in the advocacy of ensuring that the government is well prepared to participate in the SWA meeting, and very soon we'll be meeting with the finance minister to brief in and present all of those key informations we have. We have started printing the finance minister books, the handbooks, which is very important for our advocacy. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Timothy, for that. I'd like now to invite Tabalaba Bouema from Mali to talk to us about their experience, especially under the current circumstances. Allez-y, Tabalaba.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous pouvez partager ma présentation? Vous pouvez le faire? Sarem, vous pouvez partager ma présentation? Est-ce qu'on m'entend, Sarem?
Oui, Tabalaba, ta présentation, je crois qu'elle est déjà sur l'écran.
Oh non,
Si,
non,
Tabalaba, la présentation est sur l'écran, donc tu peux y aller.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Donc, merci, désolé de ce retard, dû au fait qu'il y avait des soucis de connexion, mais ça va, je vous suivais il y a bientôt une trentaine de minutes, sous le nom de Galaxy 50, j'ai modulé le nom. Et en fait, par rapport au cas du Mali, conformément à ce qui a été indiqué dans les présentations, nous, ce qui nous intéresse, c'est sur deux points. Le premier point, sur les activités préparatives en lien avec la rencontre des ministres des Finances qui doit se tenir le 4 novembre. Et également, en prélude à cette préparation, nous avons également envisagé d'organiser ce qu'on a appelé un dialogue financier sur l'eau et l'assainissement. Et par rapport au premier point, les activités préparatoires pour la rencontre des ministres des Finances à laquelle certainement nous allons prendre part de façon virtuelle, il y a un premier point très important, c'était d'abord de faire la préparation donc de partage des manuels des ministres des Finances et les documents qui rentrent en ligne avec cette préparation-là. Donc, on est récent et nous avons pris le soin de le partager d'abord au sein du comité, soit au niveau du Mali, de le partager au sein des points focaux également partagé au niveau des acteurs de la société civile, des acteurs des recherches et également le secteur privé. Et ici, comme on l'a dit, en termes de messages clés que nous avons pu retenir, c'est vraiment la participation. Pourquoi la participation? Parce que nous avons aujourd'hui, dans le cadre de ces préparatifs de la rencontre des finances, la présence du département de l'environnement et de l'assainissement, la présence du ministère de l'économie et des finances, la présence de la direction générale du budget, la présence de la direction nationale de la planification et du développement, la SWA, ça, c'est le cas de la participation au processus. Deuxième point, c'est l'organisation également du dialogue financier. Et par rapport au dialogue financier que nous avons envisagé dans le cadre des préparatifs de la rencontre des finances, on a organisé, il y a juste hier, ce qu'on a appelé une rencontre de partage avec les PTF pour voir avec eux dans quel cadre donc les PTF peuvent préparer en amont la rencontre qui aura lieu d'ici le 27. Parce que hier, c'était une rencontre de prise de contact avec les PTF pour échanger par rapport au canevas qui va être présenté le 27, qui va être le jour consacré pour la rencontre de validation et également d'échange par rapport au financement du secteur. À ce niveau, comme message clé, nous avons noté quand même qu'il y a eu un niveau de responsabilité de part et d'autre, hein, de la part des PTF, de la part de l'État, de la part des ESC, également du secteur privé. Et là, il y a eu la présence des chefs de file des PTF qui étaient là. Il y a également la présence des directeurs nationaux qui étaient là, et les responsables également des ESC qui étaient là. Le secteur privé également était fortement représenté. Voici, en tout cas, au bout de la table, ceux qui étaient là. Et tout cela va être corroboré avec une forte mobilisation des ESC qui vont être fortement impliqués afin d'abord qu'ils participent au dialogue financier qui aura lieu le 27, mais également, si ceux-ci vont participer à la rencontre des ministres des Finances qui aura lieu également le 4 novembre. Le deuxième point...
Là-bas, je vais devoir vous interrompre parce qu'on va passer...
Oui, rapidement, le deuxième point, très rapidement, en deux secondes. Les 2 secondes, par rapport à notre forte sollicitation des ESC, ça c'est très important. Et nous avons également fait un travail pour pouvoir allouer progressivement les 5% du budget au niveau du secteur. Et là, les choses sont en train de bouger parce qu'aujourd'hui, on peut vous confirmer que pour 2019-2020, on a un budget qui va autour de 3,5% pour le secteur. Ça, c'est important. Il y a aussi la relecture également des programmes qui sont en cours, qui ont été également... Et en fin de compte, le dernier point, c'est d'amener les PTF à financer l'ensemble des politiques et programmes qui sont en cours d'exécution. Donc, voici sommairement ce que j'ai voulu présenter par rapport au travail que nous sommes en train de faire pour que les préoccupations des ESC soient prises en compte dans le cadre des réformes politiques et les financements du secteur de l'assainissement. Merci, désolé d'avoir été long.
Merci beaucoup, Tabalaba. Thank you to all our presenters for those excellent experiences and for sharing with us a bit around mobilization, how civil society is working towards engaging with the finance ministers. I've seen in the chat box that we have quite a few reactions from Sana saying, you know, great job, Uganda. I'll open the floor for 2-3 questions, or probably if some would like to share some experiences as well from their side. The floor is open. Any questions to any of our presenters? Please introduce yourself and please do indicate who you would like to, which country you would like to engage with. No one? Yes, Anjani is saying, please unmute yourself and take the floor. Questions, comments, reactions?
Yeah, this is Ellen. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't raise my hand, so if someone else raised their hand, hold on. Yeah, no, I had a question related to interaction, or a comment, I guess, or I'm not sure what it is, but related to interaction with parliamentarians. I think if I understand, and I know it varies in every country, but by the time that the budget comes to Parliament, it's for kind of a stamp of approval, and all of the decisions and things have already been made. So is there a way to use parliamentarians in a different way, and those that are engaged more in the budget process? Because not all, and I don't, again, it varies from country to country, but usually there are committees and other things that are engaged, parliamentary committees that are engaged with ministries of finance throughout the budget process. So using them to hold the Ministry of Finance accountable around like things like equity or equality and leaving no one behind, or prioritization of different issues. So is there a way to engage parliamentarians differently than just verbal commitments, particularly around their support, and prioritization for WASH? I mean, I guess my question is about power, and how much power do parliamentarians really hold when it comes to budgetary processes? That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. I'll ask Yunia to provide some insights in that, and the other presenters or anybody else in the forum can go ahead and chip in as well. Yunia, would you like to address that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Or is it someone else? Okay. My response to that is that I think parliamentarians do have some level of influence on the approval of budgets, in spite of the decisions having been made. But if you equip them with the right information, what are the key things they should look out for before they approve any budget? Whether it's to do with prioritizing WASH in general, or issues to do with efficiency and delivery of the budget. Yeah, they have a role to play. And I think the key thing is to pass them the right information at the right time. And also the key learning from Uganda is to have a specific group that you equip well with this information, who can now be your champions in Parliament, but also to engage the chairman of the budget committee within Parliament. We've seen a number of budgets which have been thrown back to the different sectors if they don't address key issues that the parliamentarians are querying. So they still have a role to play in this.
And I'm seeing also a reaction from Madagascar, Arsène, that talks about having little success with parliamentarians on their end. Any challenges, or how do we go around some of these challenges, Junia, maybe based on your experience?
Any challenges? Well, I think the first one, for instance, which is at our doorstep right now, is the fact that, you may get to a certain level of equipping and having good advocates in Parliament, but then their term ends. That's where we are now. We're just praying that the key champions for us, for WASH within Parliament, come back and they continue the partnership and advocacy with us. And of course, the other thing is the high expectations. At times they come in expensively, but from the beginning, you have to, when you're engaging with them at any level, you have to review with them that you're an NGO and you don't have much funds to really meet up to their levels of, let's say, the stipulated allowances. So that way, and also you have to show them that it's a win-win for them. If you equip them with the right information, it can enable them to raise issues in Parliament, but also within their constituency. For instance, in Uganda, we have where many of them, majority of our people 80% are come from rural areas where we have point sources. And there are big issues around sustainability of these sources. So once you equip them with the guidelines, what it calls for, and you know, to maintain the point sources, and because many of them have a challenge of the communities expecting them to help address the issue of sustainability of these sources. So if you equip them with the right information, that is not their role, and who needs to do it, you know, at times they appreciate such information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yunia. I can see we have a question from Sena, Emile, and someone known as Zoom user. Please go ahead and rename. We'll start with Emile. Emile, allez-y si vous avez une question. Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to Sena.
Thank you very much, Sarine. Bonjour, everybody. Merci, Eloise, for this wonderful webinar. Two questions. First one is about, has someone ever succeeded to lobby or have his or her finance ministers accepted to participate in the FMM? If so, what was the experience? Because I think that is the ultimate goal to think of efforts.
Sena, I'm sorry, you're breaking. Is it possible to put the question in the chat box? I'm not sure if it's the case for everybody.
Yes.
Did anybody else get that question, or was it breaking all around?
I think, I'm not sure if I completely got it, but I think he's saying, can someone share an experience of an effective kind of engagement with finance ministers for the finance ministers preparation? But I'm not sure I completely heard everything.
Maybe we could ask Tabalaba to provide some.
Oui. Allô? Oui, je peux intervenir?
Oui, Sena a posé la question si on a déjà eu du succès pour convaincre des ministres de Finances et aussi faire participer le ministère de Finances. Donc, on voulait juste savoir si avec votre travail, enfin le travail que vous avez fait, si vous avez déjà eu ce genre d'expérience.
Oui, par rapport à la participation des ministres des Finances, nous, la petite expérience que nous avons, déjà dans le cadre du partage du manuel, parce que dans le manuel, il est indiqué tous les enjeux liés à la présence des ministres au cours de cette réunion. C'est extrêmement important. On a fait ce partage d'abord au niveau des cabinets. On a eu également un échange avec les PTF. Les PTF eux-mêmes, en fonction de leur rapprochement avec les ministères, ont eu à faire des contacts à travers le chef de file et des contacts avec les départements. Et nous-mêmes, au niveau de la société civile, on a envoyé une lettre officielle adressée au Premier ministre pour l'inciter à être présent le jour de la rencontre des ministres des Finances. Ils viennent juste ouvrir les cérémonies. On l'a indiqué. Et même dans le cadre de cette rencontre, on a prévu un dialogue financier pour montrer au département que ce que nous faisons comme travail est un travail qui peut être porteur et pour le secteur. Voici un peu plus ou moins, en tout cas, des éléments d'expérience que nous pouvons partager. Le processus continue et la mobilisation également au sein des acteurs de la société civile, secteur ou assainissement également continue pour que ça soit une synergie d'ensemble pour pouvoir aller à cette rencontre des ministres des Finances. Il y a la présence du Premier ministre ou bien des ministres des Finances pour pouvoir donner une impulsion politique à cette dynamique-là. ce que je peux dire comme expérience.
Merci beaucoup, Takalaba. I will ask a Zoom user, sorry, we really have to move on to the next slide to maybe type their question in the Zoom chat. And I would really like to move towards what would your question be if you had the FMM or a finance minister sitting in front of you? So some of the suggestions that we have is, of course, with the COVID-19 and debt crisis, the focus is definitely going to be shifted in terms of economic recovery, but also what does that mean in terms of spending for social sectors like WASH? And how can we still reach the most marginalized? Bearing in mind, I think the really important question that Katarina asked, why are some marginalized? What is it that drives as well that marginalization? And another suggestion would be, how do we create a case for targeted subsidies with the finance ministers? But these are just 1-2 suggestions. Would like to open the floor and hear, what question would you ask, or, if the opportunity presents itself. The floor is open.
Just maybe to add, Serene, that the opportunity will present itself because, like I said, so UNIA.
Correcting that. Yeah.
No, sorry. So no, I'm just reminding, because pretty much your inputs now, we will pick it and translate it and send it to UNIA, who will be the CSO speaker at the FMM and the finance ministers meeting, and she will be sharing some of those questions. So it's really interesting and important that we hear from you now. So if you can put your questions in the chat, we'll pick them from there as well, but you can also take the floor and obviously unmute yourself.
Any reactions from anyone? Or maybe for those that have already engaged with finance ministers or sector ministers, what was the question that you asked? Okay, so we have Arsene asking how are they, going to finance the needs of the most vulnerable, and do they know, how much it would actually cost? So that's an important question, yes.
I think, Serene, because I really want to use the brains that is in our team right now, I think you can pick as well on some people to provide you with ideas. Sorry, I'm mean, everyone. But you have so much to say, and I want to hear your voice.
Atta, if we could ask you, I know you've engaged quite a bit, especially with the budget tracking work that you've done, but what were some of the pertinent questions or the questions that were asked to the governors and subsequently to the ministers?
Yeah, thank you, Sari. Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the basic questions which the finance ministers should be asked is how would they consciously ensure sustained and regular increment of WASH budgetary provision, not minding whatever decision might be, particularly now that they are aware of the very important position WASH occupies in the development of every country. So how will they consciously ensure that constant increment of budgetary provision is sustained because that is the most important thing you get to get from the finance minister. Otherwise, if this is not if they are not committed and not committed to doing this, and things are not put in place, there is no legal framework to ensure that this is regularly done, it might not really stand the test of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atta. I'll ask Ketty. Ketty, any ideas or suggestions in terms of what are some of the questions that we could ask or present? Oh, Ketty, I think, is muted.
Hello, Sarin?
Yes.
Hello? Oui, j'ai demandé la main.
Oui,
Oui, j'ai soulevé
allez-y.
la main.
Allez-y.
OK, merci. Nous, les questions que nous allons pouvoir poser au ministre des Finances portent sur 2 points. Premier point, c'est pour dire au ministre des Finances, au regard de la pandémie de Covid-19, donc qui a marqué, en tout cas, le niveau social, économique et voire de développement de notre pays, le Mali, est-ce qu'il n'est pas temps de consacrer des moyens suffisants au secteur eau et assainissement qui, pour nous, devait être un des leviers pour pouvoir lutter contre la pandémie? Ça, c'est la première question. Parce que si j'ai bien compris, compte tenu que la pandémie a été, comme vous le savez, assez dévastateur pour beaucoup de pays, y compris le Mali, est-ce qu'il n'est pas temps d'investir dans le secteur eau et assainissement pour faire face à la pandémie? Première question. Deuxième question, qu'en est-il du respect de l'engagement du Mali dans le cadre du SWA, autrement dit, consacrer 5% du budget national à l'assainissement? Qu'en est-il? Où en est-on? Est-ce que nous sommes sûrs que dans les années à venir, l'engagement pourrait être respecté à travers l'engagement du ministre des Finances en faveur du secteur de l'assainissement? Voici les 2 questions, en tout cas, qui peuvent être posées à notre ministre des Finances.
Merci beaucoup, Tabalaba. Donc, sur ce point, nous allons bien sûr clôturer la réunion. Nous vous remercions beaucoup pour votre participation. Si vous avez encore des questions que vous aimeriez bien poser, s'il vous plaît, nous avons encore à peu près 1 semaine pour tout mettre en ordre et pour bien préparer Yunia pour la réunion. Et j'aimerais rapidement inviter Héloïse pour en finir avec la réunion. Merci à tous. Héloïse, à vous.
Yes, thank you so much, Serene. So I think there's lots of questions that some were shy to say. So please send, if you have more questions that you think you would have wanted to raise with finance ministers at the finance ministers meeting, please write to Anjani and I so we can capture them and share them with Yunia. And I just wanted to take this time to really thank everyone for their participation. Thank obviously Katerina and Serene for the facilitation and the presentation. We will share with you the PowerPoint, and you can share it obviously widely with the CSOs in your networks, because most of you are heads of networks. And I think it's a very good call to say that this is important, and we need to continue that in the coming months to really allow for you to learn from each other more. You have a lot of extensive experience, and you could help each other in building that advocacy for WASH and finance. So a big thank you. Send us through your questions. We will share with you the documents, and obviously come to the finance ministers meeting. Invite your partners to come as well. This is a golden opportunity. It's the first time that finance ministers meeting are open to all to listen. So really use that opportunity to even hear how finance ministers speak. You know, I think it's a rare opportunity to really hear them and from close. So really come to the meeting meeting, like we explained, is on the 4th of November. We'll share again the registration links with you in our email with a PowerPoint. Thank you, everyone, and continue your hard work for the Finance Minister's preparations, and we'll be continuing the work with you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
You have one mic?